All right, welcome to our January meeting, and thank you all for the wonderful displays. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the 7 o'clock session, but it's wonderful to look out and see all this, so we really appreciate it. And we don't think we had any speakers, correct?
No.
Okay, so we will jump right into reports and we will start with the EMSISD Police Department report. Chief Ramirez.
All right. Good evening, Madam President, Superintendent Chadwell, and members of the board. Coming before you today with this action item, and what it is a communications agreement with the City of Fort Worth to allow us to use their towers. That way we can have access to our communications police radios. Again, you see the cost there, but it would allow us access not only to our officers on each campus, but other jurisdictions as well, meaning Blue Mound, Saginaw, Fort Worth, Oldham City, if they had to come into our area. So this would allow us to basically save a lot of money, but use their towers as well. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Any questions? This is the action item later this evening. Any questions? Okay. If not, thank you. We'll move on to the Human Resources report. Dr. Ganell.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Chadwell, members of the board. We're bringing to you tonight 4 positions for your consideration, and we're bringing them as a report initially. You'll see it later as an action item. So the 4 positions really fall into 2 categories. The first 2 really have to do with a change in the market for the positions. So we're looking at our instructional media coordinator and our certification officer. The responsibilities for those jobs have really increased with the state requirements, as well as the proficiencies needed to be successful in those jobs. So these are not new FTEs. We're requesting a reclassification of those positions to really try to recruit the highest qualified personnel. That is, of course, in alignment with Aspire 2025. You have seen the instructional media coordinator position before. We brought it to you in November to reclassify it at that time from a 7, which is a support position as a paraprofessional, to a professional. We did get a lot of qualified candidates for the job at that point, but the competencies really just weren't at the level we needed. So we believe we need to move it up another pay grade in order to get the highest qualified. The other 2 positions really align with another part of our Aspire plan, which is to aggressively recruit and retain the highest qualified personnel. So we know bringing on Eagle Mountain High School is going to expand both our athletics programs and our fine arts programs. So what we are requesting is to go ahead and bring in the administrative leadership needed to support the expansion of those programs. To recruit the best, we got to get out there early. So we know that the school opens next year, but we want to begin building the infrastructure for those programs this year. So those 2 are actually new FTEs, and then the certification officer and instructional media coordinator are reclassifications. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Finance report. Mr. Welch.
Good evening, trustees. Tonight we have several items to report to you from the District Financial Department. The first item is a presentation of the completed audit report and financial statements for the year ended August 31st, 2022. Following the presentation, an action item to approve the annual financial report prior to filing it with the Texas Education Agency is provided later in tonight's agenda. Providing details of the report is Mr. Carl Deaton with the district's external audit firm, Hankins, Estep, Deaton, Ton, and Say. Mr. Deaton? We've provided a hard copy of the report at your place.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Dr. Chadwell, members of the board. Yes, you do have in front of you a copy of the audited financial statements for this last fiscal year, August 31, 2022. I'd like to hit the highlights with you and then see if you have any questions I could answer. As always, the report starts with the independent auditor's report. And for those of you who have paid attention to that, the report is a good bit more lengthy this year and format's different, but primarily it expanded talking about the auditor's responsibilities for these financial statements, but it does remind you that these are your financial statements. We've simply come in and performed audit procedures on them to be able to express an opinion that they present fairly the financial position of the results of operations of the school district for this last fiscal year. And if you'll turn to page 24, that is probably the page in the report you're most interested in. It's going to show the results of operations for the larger of the funds of the district. There are 4 funds that are considered major funds. The largest by far being the left column there, the general fund. The general fund basically accounts for any dollars not required to be accounted for in another separate fund. And if you follow that column to the bottom, you'll see a $10,155,000 increase in fund balance this last year from 61.4 million to 71.5. It's kind of a qualification on that 10.1, or a reminder. You probably know that $5.7 million of that was the receipt of what are called ESSER pre-award costs, basically a reimbursement in this fiscal year of expenditures, COVID-related expenditures of the prior fiscal year. Those come into revenue when you receive it. And so those are in the revenue. That's 5.7 of that 10.1, as well as you were able to draw $1.2 million of indirect costs into the general fund out of your federal awards this last year. You subtract those two out, really the increase from operations is about $3.1 million last year. That 71.5 million is right at 4 months worth, 121 days worth of last year's spending as far as a reserve. However, if you turn back to page 20, you'll see a reminder at the bottom of the general fund column on this page that you did adopt a projected budget deficit for this year. You committed that $5.7 million of pre-award ESSER costs. That's that $5,786,000 figure, as well as an additional $1 million for a total projected budget deficit of $6.7 million. That leaves unassigned fund balance of $59 million out of that $71 million. That $59 million still is 100 days of last year's expenditures. So you're still over the 90-day or 3-month minimum threshold that most folks in my position would tell you that you need to strive to always have on hand. All right, so if you turn back to page 24, the other major funds of the district, the middle column on page 24, the debt service fund, of course, it pays the payments on your bonded debt, collects the interest and sinking property taxes to be able to do that. You see an increase in its fund balance of 2.5 million up to an ending fund balance of $12.8 million, which is still healthy. It's not really a big percent of the $60 million that was spent, but it is a fairly decent fund balance. The capital projects fund on page 24, of course, it collects the proceeds from any bond sales, and toward the bottom is a reminder that you did have about, you had one bond sale this last year that was about $200 million, and $96 million was spent on capital construction projects this last year. Bottom of that column, you still have $372 million of unspent bond proceeds at August 31st to tide you into this year. The fourth major fund shows on page 25, the Child Nutrition Fund. This fund is like most every other child nutrition fund in the state this last year, and that is showing a pretty significant profit because the federal reimbursement rates were significantly higher still last year due to COVID, and all kids were able to eat free due to COVID regulations as well. So you see almost a $4 million profit in the Child Nutrition Fund this last year, added to the $2 million beginning, ending fund balance of $5.89 million. That is both good news and bad news. It's great news to have that much in reserve. Unfortunately, it's more than you're allowed to have in reserve. You're only allowed to have 3 months worth of expenditures in the Child Nutrition Fund. 3 months worth, if you do the calculations, leaves about $3.1 million of excess fund balance in that fund. And Aaron has worked on a plan that is required to be submitted to the state of how that excess fund balance is going to be spent down. So obviously this is an opportunity to spend money on things that might not be able to be worked into the budget in a normal year as far as whether it's equipment needs or whatever. But the state will want to see a plan about how you will try to spend that $3.1 million excess this last year on needs of that program. Okay, those are the 4 major funds of the district. The other funds I want to point out to you, turning to page 29, you have one fund that is treated as, it's labeled here as a proprietary fund. The column labels an enterprise fund. Basically, this fund is expected to cover its costs with the revenue that's generated. This fund is the employee child care program that's accounted for in this fund. What I want to point out on page 29 is even this fund was able to receive COVID funds this last year. You see a federal revenue of $390, which is new, which is some child care relief funds that were received through the Texas Workforce Commission. That basically added or consisted of the operating income this last year of $372, ending fund balance in this fund of $482. So this fund as well basically has, there's no maximum in this fund that you can, that is a amount that you can only build up to, but this fund as well has dollars to be able to spend in that program that it might not necessarily always have. And then beginning on page 82 is where you'll find all of the rest of the funds. Pages 82 through 85 give you about a couple dozen other funds that basically are primarily all the state and local revenues that the district, federal and state revenues that the district receives from various sources, the IDEA-B program, the title programs, but in particular on page 83 is where you'll see, again, more COVID-related money that you're well familiar with, the ESSER funds primarily, beginning with the Fund 266, that is the ESSER 1. You'll see a column for the ESSER 2, the ESSER 3, the ESSER supplemental, and the amounts that were spent in those, out of those particular dollars this last year. There are more dollars, ESSER dollars to spend this year as well. But those funds continue through page 85. And basically these funds are what are called special revenue funds, in that the minute the funds come in the door, they're already earmarked or spoken for a particular purpose, which is why they're accounted for separately like this. Page 89, I always like to point out the property tax schedule, especially when it looks very good, which yours does for this last year. Page 89 is the annual summary of what the delinquent tax balance was owed to the district at the beginning of the year, the levies, the collections, the adjustments, and the ending balance. And you'll see basically the amount of delinquent taxes owed to the district dropped from 3.4 million to 2.8 million from beginning to the end of the year. About 400,000 of that you can see were adjustments, which had to have been supplements, adjustments, lawsuits, settlements, whatever that came through the appraisal district. But still, even factor that out, that's a $200,000 drop, which is a really good collection rate that the district had this last year. And then beginning on page 93, there's about 10 pages worth of what's called the federal award section. Because you do receive a good bit of federal funds, there are 2 additional auditor's report letters that basically tell you that We detected no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in your internal control system to report to you, and that for the federal programs that we were required to perform detailed compliance work on, we found no non-compliance that we needed to report. Those particular programs we did compliance work in are detailed on page 99. And basically, some of them are on a rotation basis where we have to look at them every 3 years. Some of them are just because of the size of the dollars received, we have to do work in. But all that leads up to pages 101 through 103 that basically details the over $38 million of federal awards and reimbursements that the district received this last year, and the various grant numbers and things that the awarding agencies want to see in the audit report. So a lot of detail there, but a lot of audit work and compliance work on the district's part that this requires as well. Okay, and then one thing I don't normally point out, but I want to point out because there was a new accounting standard this last year. Back beginning on page 46. 46 is the capital asset schedule of the district. It basically is the accumulation of what the district has spent on all of its land purchases, building purchases, equipment, vehicles, so on in past years. But in the middle of that schedule at the bottom of page 46, you'll see a new line called right to use asset. And if you saw that and wonder what that is, basically there was a new standard that came out that said if you have, as a district, have entered into long-term operating leases, which you have, you lease your copy machines on a long-term basis as a district. You've leased a fairly large amount of Promethean boards and Dell computers. The theory in the standard is that there is value to your right to be able to use those assets for a number of years for you having made that commitment. And that value has to be quantified these days in the audit report. And so the numbers you'll see here are basically, they come back basically to the present value of all the future lease payments you're going to make on these assets, and they are capitalized and depreciated. And then on page 48, after the schedule on 48 that lists all of your bonded debt, in that schedule you'll see a line that says lease liability. So that's the same thing. Those basically pretty much mirror each other, offset each other, but they're basically recorded as an asset and a liability in these financial statements these days. And page 49 is a new page footnote that basically describes this lease arrangement and pulls all those numbers out into one place. So if you saw that, I just want to let you know basically what that was. There's going to be a similar standard next year for what are called subscription-based information technology agreements. So any basically technology agreements long-term that you've signed are going to have to be quantified and added here as well. So,
did you impute the interest rate at 2.5? Was that, I saw it was, is that imputed by?
You use, the standard says you use what your incremental borrowing rate is. And so if there's not a rate listed in the lease document itself, it's just kind of an estimate. And yes, for the district, we use 2.5%, which is disclosed in that footnote on page 49. Okay, then last but not least, I want to point out the page 17, the government-wide financial statement. And again, pointed out primarily just to make sure that you're aware that it's not really anything to be concerned about, that the bottom line on this statement on page 17 is a negative. I'm sure if you've been on the board, you recall that it is the unfunded portion of the TRS liabilities for retirement and health insurance that we have to record in the statement that basically throw it in the negative. But I also want to point out that this negative 56 million on the schedule on page 17 was a negative 90 million a year ago. So it's trending the right direction because things like your fund balances continue to trend in the right direction as well. All right, so there are no what I would call blips or dings in this report. There are no functions that were over budget in the 3 funds that you're required to legally adopt a budget. You were fully insured, fully collateralized at the bank for every day last year, which is good, which is not necessarily always the case, but it was this last year. And so it's really a really strong, healthy looking report. And if you've got any questions about anything you saw or anything that I said, be happy to try to answer them.
One question, in regards to the child nutrition and the 3 million overage that has to be spent, is there a timeline when that has to be spent, or can it be spent over a period of time?
Well, I'm pretty sure that the plan you submit to the state, you're saying you're going to try to spend this in the next year. If we come up next year and you're still over the 3 months, you'll just have to submit another plan. And I really don't know what TDOA would do if you went multiple years being over the 3 months. But you're supposed to try your best to spend that 3.1 down this year.
Thank you.
And we do have plans within the child nutrition department to look at improvements to updates at the campus level for serving lines and kitchens. And so there are some expenditures planned, and that information will be forthcoming. Go ahead.
It's in an action item tonight for consideration at Saginaw High School, which if it's approved, I believe would take a third of that money.
Does that include furniture?
It will in the child nutrition area. There are some limitations. I don't believe, can you do cafeteria tables? I want to say.
Might be able to, but
okay.
I'll have to ask Aaron. He'll have to get advice on that.
Yeah. But as far as the actual equipment within the kitchen, yes, and all of the things, and in fact, all of our renovations we've done in the district on that, barring major renovations from bond, have all been through the child nutrition fund being managed in that way. So we've been able to take those profits, if you will, and either take care of those capital expenses and or lower the cost of the daily lunch price for kids. And so as we look at our daily lunch price, we're still below the market average in that area. So we've been able to manage that very well.
I have one. So we have, I know you want to have at least 3 months for fund balance, right? We have 421 days. Can't the state start taking some of that back if you get too much? What's too much?
Well, currently there's no rule as to what's too much. Now you hear talk about the state, I don't hear talk from the state. I hear talk from on these chat groups and from other districts that, they're afraid the state will come and take back what they consider excess fund balance. But to date, they have not defined anything that they consider excess fund balance. And I don't consider 4 months to be excessive at all. When you've got this large of a district, $220 million flowing through your accounts, all it takes is property tax to be slow coming in because TAD has a problem 1 year or some other reason, and you've got to dip into your fund balance.
And also, I think it was about a year ago that we had the report from Josh McLaughlin from our financial advisor that went over some examples as far as we don't carry as much as many districts do. We've had a philosophy in the district that we don't want to hold the taxpayers' money, that we want to have an operational savings account, if you will, and we want to turn it over. And so it's going up a little bit. I think a lot better than the opposite that you were just talking about, where you get a blip, but also going into a legislative session that gives us some ability to have a little bit more confidence as we build a budget when we really don't know what next year's numbers will be until the end of May. Unless there's a special session, then it could go into June. So it's good timing to have this opportunity. We also have a charter school that's going to be opening in the district come August. It's on the edge of our district. The effect of that we do not predict to be as heavy as the charter school that's on Old Decatur, but it's still one we have to factor on. and having some additional fund balance there will allow us to address any unforeseen blip in the attendance enrollment.
Questions?
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
all right,
your work.
thank you.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to just acknowledge the business office, Rob Welch and Doug and Jane, a tremendous amount of work that's been done. Their cars have been in the parking lot probably most weekends. I'm working with Carl. Carl does a great job, but he does do due diligence to make sure that we cover every area. So thank you for all of your work.
I'll make one comment, being a non-accountant, like the person sitting to my right. I mean, I've been here for several years now, and I appreciate your explanation in the way you lay stuff out in the book and stuff, because for a layperson, some of this is hard to understand, and you make it very easy to understand, and I appreciate that as a board member.
All right, moving on, you have a evaluation of fund balance report for us as well?
Absolutely. And so as we present the final audit each year, it's also an ideal time to revisit our fund balance trends and potential impacts as we look into the near future. And if you'll follow me onto page 128 of your board book, we have a report of fund balance history. If you follow the line for year 2022, just above the green box, you can see that we have adjusted the ending fund balance for that $5.7 million amount in revenue from ESSER pre-award cost reimbursements that were received in the 2022 year, but are intended to be used in support of the 2023 fiscal year, as Mr. Deaton pointed out before. With those amounts removed from the balance and our updated expenditure levels, we're sitting at 111 days, or 111.32 days of operations, which is a slight increase over the prior year and above the 90-day target established by the board. Now, we just talked about why fund balance is important, and a number of things, including our credit agencies, as a district that is engaged in building and growth. We're going to be issuing bonds, and that's obviously our credit rating is a significant factor in keeping our interest costs down. When we talk to credit rating agencies, and as you mentioned, Dr. Chadwell, a report from Mr. McLaughlin was that 90 days is really a real minimum in the way credit agencies look. And so, you know, we do want to keep fund balance on target as much as we can. At the same time, we also know going into the next couple of years, we've got some expenses in opening new facilities. Elizabeth Lopez Hatley Elementary next year, and Eagle Mountain High School the following year, which that does put a strain on the budget. And so as we look at this projection going forward and looking at where our days will be, what I wanted to look at is kind of keep it simple for all the variables that are out there right now, and the way that we look at the future projections. I think our target needs to be, for this purpose, to keep it simple, we're going to try to have net revenues and expenditures each year so that we hold our fund balance level. But we know our expenditure levels are going to increase. And so we took a very big picture kind of look at our target cost. And so we've adjusted in the green box. You can see where that adjusted fund balance is staying at the $65.7 million number coming into this year and the next 2 years. But then expenditures wise, our expenditure projection for this year is $230 million. We anticipate that next year will be an additional $10 million, and then the year after that will be $11 million in increased costs. So holding everything constant from that standpoint. And again, we have a legislative agenda coming, a legislative year coming. We have a lot of things that are going to change, but just being able to see what is the impact if with the increased cost over the next couple of years, and we can see where that 111 days moves towards that 90-day mark. And so we just wanted to keep that on target and as a visual here to see, what we're working with. And at the end of 2025, we're sitting right about 95 days. But obviously over the next 6 months and then into the future years, we'll be working with our budget projections. And again, dealing with a lot of potential changes happening with the legislature this year. So these numbers will move, but we wanted to have just a general idea of what that impact is if we hold everything constant with the potential increases. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address those. Otherwise, we just wanted to give a quick evaluation of what we're seeing.
Questions? All right, then talk to us about the budget amendment.
All right. So budget amendment is, we are providing a budget amendment on tonight's agenda to capture adjustments to the 2022-2023 budget. And as you can see in your packet, there are no adjustments to the child nutrition or debt service funds, but we are providing multiple functional transfers in the general fund that have been requested by departments and campuses with no impact to the total expenditures and revenue levels, at least at this time. There's only one proposed amendment with offsetting increases to revenues and expenditures, and that's for facility rentals in the amount of $1,995. With the audit and closing out the prior year, along with crossing that mid-school year mark, we will be making some additional amendment proposals over the next few months to reflect updated end-of-year projections. Be happy to answer any questions, but this is a pretty straightforward amendment for you tonight.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Welch.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Fleet Welch, let's go ahead and do the operations report then. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Good evening. We have some, I think, 5 projects to present tonight. If I can
report, education services, advanced academic report. Mrs. Levitt.
All right. President Ring, Dr. Chadwell, Board, thank From Boswell High School, I've got Jamie Morgan and Riley Kavanaugh. And then from Saginaw High School, Carrie D'Amico and Kathy Bradshaw. These teams on each of the campuses work very diligently to provide opportunities for our students and meet with them as well and guide them through these processes. Thank you, guys. Tonight, we're going to talk about advanced placement, dual credit, and on-ramps. We're going to begin by looking at enrollment in each of the programs. Our middle school
48 PM on, oh my goodness, what's the date? January 3rd, or 23rd, 2023, and the board will now recess for dinner and then reconvene in a closed meeting pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meeting Act. Texas Government Code Section 551.071 for the purpose of private consultation with the board's attorney. 551.072 for the deliberating a purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. Section 551.074 for the purpose of deliberating the appointment, employment, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee. Section 551.075 for the purpose of deliberations regarding deployment or specific occasions for implementation of security personnel or devices or security audits, and section 551.082 to consider discipline of a public school child or complaint or charge against personnel.
Welcome to our first meeting of 2023. Thank you all for being here with us today, and thank you for all of the wonderful surprises around the room for us. We really appreciate that. Let's go on to our opening ceremony. We have Gilman Elementary School.
Board of Trustees and Dr. Chadwell, and on behalf of Board Appreciation Month, we just want to thank you for your service and your commitment to our students and staff and community members. I'd love to introduce you to some fabulous Gilman Elementary students that I have with me today to help us with the opening ceremony. Starting on the end over here is Grace Franks. She's a first grader, parents of Nicole and Jay Franks. She participates in Pioneer Youth Baseball and Softball Association. Gracie loves to draw and play with creature dogs, and she wants to be a softball player when she grows up. And she is the top eagle for the month of January. Next we have Catherine Scarborough, second grader, parents of Casey and Douglas Scarborough. She participates in flawless gymnastics and is also participating in RYA baseball and cheerleading. Catherine likes to do gymnastics and play video games with her brother. She wants to be a teacher when she grows up. And she also has earned the top eagle for the month of January. Next we have Emmanuel Perez. He's a third grader. Parents are Barbara and Miguel Perez. He's a member of our student counselor, and he also participates in our spelling club. Emmanuel wants to play sports, or loves to play sports and read books. He wants to be a soccer player when he grows up. Top eagle of the month of January as well. Next up, we have a fourth grader, Dominic Nieto. He's a fourth grader, parents of Heidi Meza and Jaime Nieto. Dominic likes to play soccer and draw with his dad. He wants to be a police officer when he grows up. And last but not least, we have Debbie Gomez. She's a fifth grader, parent Maria Riviera Perez. Debbie loves to play soccer and draw as well. And she also wants to be a police officer when she grows up.
Real quick before y'all leave, just real quick before you leave, real quick, just wanted to note that Chief Ramirez, Chief, if you would wave, Chief Ramirez is our Chief of Police, and he also was a former Assistant Chief in Fort Worth, and guess where he grew up? Blue Mountain, and he went to Yellowland, so. Best in your pursuits, and maybe someday you'll be a chief. Here you go. Thank you.
And on to our communications, we have some special recognitions.
Good evening, members of the board. And yes, we have a chief here and you can go and we have one police officers maybe set his platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we also have, of course, Gracie and Catherine are here, and if the softball thing doesn't work out for Gracie, then she can join Catherine on the gymnastics team, because she was showcasing her wonderful cartwheel abilities up there earlier. They were very, very good. So we just love having our students here for that, and we're also here to celebrate you tonight. Every year, the governor and the Texas Association of School Boards designates January as School Board Appreciation Month. The theme of this year's celebration is Forward Together, which is very apt for what we do here every day in the NSRC and your leadership. As part of this recognition in our district, each school does adopt a board member to whom they show appreciation throughout the year. In addition to special activities on campuses, board members are celebrated during the regular meeting in January. This particular meeting with campus-made posters, cards, all of the campus that you see around the room here for you tonight. So EMSIC board members, just for the audience that's listening in and here in the room, they serve a critical role in the advancement of our district. As you know, you're responsible for ensuring competitive compensation so that we can have world-class educators in our classrooms every day. You work to focus on creating environments for our facilities that are equipped to support the learning that's happening every day. You are available and engaged with parents and teachers and students and administrators to try to listen to concerns, continue to grow, resolve any issues that come up, and work together collaboratively. You're responsible for an annual general operating budget of $232 million. More than 23,000 students, nearly 3,300 employees, and 29 school campuses, and growing. During the 2022 calendar year, you also spent time on yourselves to better yourselves for this district with all of your training. So you guys contribute a lot of your own personal time to volunteering for this role. And the boards that have come before you and the board that you are today has led us to the district that we are. A very brief walk down memory lane with a short video that our
You know, I remember back in 1883, the first school was built in this area. And 683 students back then. And then boom, in the 2010, the science became more popular than Boulder. Now there are 29 campuses and 23,000 students. People still move every day. There could be more than 40,000 students here one day in the region. And hopefully continue to make sure we have great schools and great teachers. Don't worry, the public education will be prepared for that. And we're going to be going there.
January is Board Appreciation Month. Thank the board members. They're moving EMSISD forward by fostering a culture of excellence for all students, staff, and families in EMSISD.
So our communications and marketing department joins our schools, our departments, and our leadership in thanking you, our board members, for your dedication, commitment, and service. Thank you.
you so much. And again, this is a very happy day for us. And we are just so proud of what we were able to do over the last year. As you recall, the board approved the creation of the police department following Dr. Chadwell's mission when he brought me on board. And because of your support, Dr. Chadwell's commitment to make it happen, here we are today, 18 officers who have graciously decided to come over for the first ever EMSI police department. I couldn't be proud of each one of these individuals. They bring talent, they bring diversity, they bring a lot of things to the ISD. More importantly, they bring the ability to love students, love kids. And that was one of the first things I asked when we interviewed these individuals. Many years of leadership on this team, many years of experience on this team. We got folks from other cities, we got folks from other ISDs, we got folks from JPS Hospital. So again, it's amazing the diversity we got, not only in what we look like or our makeup, but the fact that the work that they come from. So what I'd like to do is start from me and introduce you all. You've probably seen a couple of these guys for a long time because they're really from the get-go, but I couldn't be prouder. Brian Fox, captain, he's part of our command staff. He has 36 years of federal, state, and local law enforcement experience coming to the DMSIT. Next, Sergeant John Brady, he's also part of the command staff. He has 38 years of law enforcement experience. Say I'm proud enough to work with John for several years in war. I was happy to go on board. The next two individuals the same way. Gary Reynolds, Sergeant, with 31 years experience in law enforcement. Then Sean McCoy, also 31 years of command experience in Fort Worth as well. These guys, John, particularly Sean, Gary, all retired as lieutenants from Fort Worth Police Department and their respective divisions that they commanded. Going on down, Martin Cervantes, he's going to be an officer at Baldwin High School. He has 2 years law enforcement. Excited to have this young, unique officer here. And what's great about being an officer at that early stage of his career is they haven't developed bad habits yet. And so that's why I'm excited about you to be doing that career that you have here at the inside of the here. Again, up next is Lincoln Mulvaney, 19 years law enforcement. He's also at Baldwin High School. He's also our firearms instructor. He's responsible for a lot of our training that goes on board. He was in a command position when he was a leadership position when he was at his other department. So we're excited to have him on board. Unfortunately, Dustin Hatley is not here, he's sick, but he's at Chisholm Trail High School. But Officer Glenn Eifert comes to us with 3.5 years of law enforcement experience. Again, one of the new officers willing and again, not really setting those ways that you get after 5 or 7 years maybe at a department. So excited to have him on board. Huge gentleman behind me, the Sanger High School, Eric Dortch, great young giant. Again, glad to have him on board. In his previous life, he did play a little professional basketball. So if we ever start a team, so next is Don Wright. Again, I was excited to bring Don on board. Matter of fact, I think we met at the intersection, and she was waving at me, and I was in the vehicle, and I rolled down the window. She says, "I'm working for JPS, and this one officer at JPS, and he moved me behind. You interested?" I said, "Yeah, we are." Wow, we're going to see has 17 years of law enforcement experience. He's working at Watson. And there's a reason why I put Watson there, because him there at Watson, because his ability to talk to kids, his ability to maintain his posture all the time, very professional, very military-like, so perfect out of school. So we have a Creekview Middle School, Tiffany Long. She's our favorite. She has 1 year, and she decided she wanted to come over to the ISD. Her passion was working with kids, so I'm excited to have her on board. Next to her at Ed Wilkie Middle School, Alaya Rodriguez. She has 17 years of law enforcement experience, and again, we're excited to be here be here because she was actually our first police hire when we started out. So we were the first one we brought on board as an officer. And luckily, she went back and told a couple of buddies, and we brought that on board as well. So we're excited about her being able to recruit for us. Next is Diane Schmidt. She's also an officer. She's 11-year veteran. She's at Highland Middle School. And this is putting up the little bag that you have. I think God created those and made those for you guys. So again, and you're going to appreciate it for what I'm doing for the process, not the little thing that she did, but she does also. Next, young officer as well, Aubrey Davis. He's at Morning Creek Middle. Again, happy to have him on board. Came to us a little bit late, he'll tell you. But we're excited to have him because I think he's another passion for the kids. Another officer that's not here with us today is Carl Davis. He's an officer in the Ferguson Middle School. He has 30 years with Dallas PD. We got sick today. Next we have Jeff Mitchell, 31 years. He's at Wayside Middle. Again, bring Jeff on board with all the experience. Again, what we like to see is those officers who've seen a career in law enforcement and are able to still come on board and contribute. So that's why to see retirees come on board and do something special because I think they have enough police experience that they can really know how to interact with people very good. Sheila Mayer, she's not here today, but she's your dispatcher. She's been a friend of mine for a long time. She's a 29-year veteran of the police department as a dispatcher call taker and our police information center. She graduated from Baldwin High School, well safe time. And then last but not least is something we can do without is Alfonso Perez. He's part of our IT team. I don't know if he's here, but if he's wondering. Okay, so he's really good. So, again, we are just so excited to be here at the police department. Again, it seemed like once we got stuff rolling, we got the approval, everything just seemed to click and get go in place. And we were fortunate to, when we opened up the process, we did have quite a few applicants come through. We did the proper background, we did the things necessary to ensure that this district, this department has some of the best officers that we can offer to students. Our mission is to make everyone in the district, visitors, students, teachers, feel as safe as they can. And we'll continue to do that. Like I said, we're going to bring safety and security to each school, make that a priority for all of us. And the fact that, working together with the school district, the admin, you're going to be able to create a department that's actually yours. We'll be able to have really consistency across the district when it comes to interacting with our students, meaning you're not going to really get us in trouble or not trouble. And this interaction, they're going to be pretty fair and they're going to be pretty safe no matter if they're wrong or signing on Chisholm or East. It's going to be fair and equitable across the board. And that's what this department can do. So we're excited about the opportunity. We're excited about the fact that you guys trust us enough to take care of your safety and security. We still have a partnership with Fort Worth, Saginaw, and Blue Mountain, and they'll never go away. But again, I think having your own police department is really unique. And now we manage the resources and we can move them anywhere you want to, when you want to, at any given time. So again, I want to thank the board, thank Dr. Chadwell, for just your support, all throughout the whole process. And I think we happy to be the chief of this group of officers, and I'm extremely proud of what they represent. So thank you guys.
You were here for, and you wanted to use it up. So we're going to speak now. We're going to head into action items. right, our first action item is to approve a 2022-2023 class size waiver. Ms. Turnbull.
Good evening. President Green, Dr. Chadwick, distinguished members of the board, I stand before you again to say thank you for being an amazing and an outstanding board that does support our students, parents, and our community. I stand before you tonight to your trust direct attention to page 203. I stand before you tonight for your approval of the submission of this class size waiver report. This time in this report, we have 7 campuses with a total of 17 sections. This is a little bit different than last year where we had, I believe we had 4 campuses with 7 sections. And so if you look at this report, you will see again, you will see the incremental number of 1. I would like to draw your attention to Northbrook. Northbrook is a campus where they had 5 sections in 4th grade. I believe that section was they had some in that section. The teachers and the administration decided that in the best interest of the students, that they would take those students and split those students in between that 4th grade team. I think that is amazing. Because what they wanted to do was, number one, they wanted to do the statement number 5 says, in education is a team effort. And they also wanted to make sure that they maximize the potential of the students learning and created an engaging environment. So in that situation, you will see in the 4th grade, you will see more than like the 23, you will see the 25 and 2 of the section. And so I would like to stand and have you approve this, and do you have any questions for me?
I move we approve the submission of the pre-kindergarten through the 4th grade class size submissions as presented.
Second. A motion by John, and a second by Liz. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
All right, and next, consider approving the communication system agreement between the city of Fort Worth and EMS ISD.
I will go ahead and make it. I'll make a motion. Here we go. I recommend we approve the communication systems agreement between the city of Fort Worth and EMS ISD on behalf of its police department as presented earlier in the report.
Alright, a motion by Donna and a second by Steve. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0. Next, we have approval of the 2021-2022 financial audit report. Mr. Welch.
Earlier tonight, we heard a presentation from our auditor providing the details of the report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time as well.
I move we approve the 21-22 financial audit report.
Second.
Motion by Steve and a second by Donna. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0. Next, adopt a call to order for the 2023 school trustee general election.
Places 6 and 7 currently held by Elizabeth Lopez Hatton and Don Webb, respectively, expired this year. So we're providing this order of election for the Saturday, May 6, 2023 election.
I move that we adopt the order of election for the trustee general election on Saturday, May 6, 2023.
Second.
Donna or Dennis? Motion by Steve and a second by Donna. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0. Next, we have an act on a 2022-23 budget amendment.
I move we approve the budget amendment for January 2023.
Second.
Motion by Steve and a second by Tim. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Motion carries 6-0. Next, we need to conduct a federal program public meeting. Mr. Welch. Do you have a presentation first or anything?
Yes, we do have a presentation.
Before the hearing?
Before the hearing, yes. You can, I think we can go ahead and open the public meeting now.
Okay.
And then I'll provide the
the right one, too. Okay, at this time, on behalf of the Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD, I declare an open meeting to discuss the district's ESSER use of funds plan and return to in-person instruction and community services plan.
All right. Good evening again. Tonight we're conducting a public meeting as part of the administration of the ESSER-related grants with this brief presentation about the program. Originating from different congressional acts, the ESSER 3, ESSER 2, and ESSER SUP grants have similar but different intents and purposes surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. These three grants also have similar allowable uses, including addressing student learning loss, retaining employees, and operational needs. And then the ESSER 3 entitlement is $13.2 million, and the district has spent $7.8 million, leaving $5.4 million budgeted in the 2022, 2023, and 2023-2024 fiscal years. The ESSER 2 entitlement is $5.9 million, and the district has spent $2.6 million, leaving $3.2 million budgeted in the 2022-2023 budget year. And then with the ESSER SUP grant, the district has a $4.7 million entitlement, has spent $2 million, and has a remaining balance of $2.7 million budgeted in the current year. District has utilized the funding for a range of activities and has a proposed use of funds document posted on the district's website under the ESSER grant program link in the homepage footer. In addition to the ESSER use of funds plan, the district developed and provided a return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan, more commonly referred to as the RIPEX plan, as we prepared for the 2020-2021 school year. And the plan remains available on the same ESSER grant program link on the district's homepage. We do have the public meeting tonight and continue to invite public comments from stakeholders through this forum or anytime through the Let's Talk link on the district homepage. A little additional information that we provided on the RIPEX plan there and what it addresses. And then several comments in closing as they relate to all three grants are that one, the grants have provided significant support for addressing student and staff needs, two, strategically utilizing them in the most effective way that's been necessary, and three, care and strategy is necessary in operating as the funds expire over the current next fiscal years. This concludes the presentation of ESSER use of funds plan and RIPEX plans.
Okay, so at this time, we will proceed to the public comment portion of the open meeting. Are there any requests from the audience to speak on this agenda item? Okay. Seeing none, with the conclusion of public comments and no further presentation, I declare this public meeting to discuss the district's ESSER use of funds plan and return to in-person instruction and continuity of service plans closed. And we will now move to the next agenda.
We commonly refer to it as a RIPEX plan. You said more commonly refer to it as.
Yes, because people are have that exactly. That's a lazy way out.
Yeah.
We've got another public hearing for the Texas Academic Performance Report. Gary, go for it.
You can open it up and then
At this time, on behalf of the Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD, I declare an open hearing on the 2021-2022 Texas Academic Performance Report in compliance with the Texas Administrative Code, Title 19, Chapter 61, Subchapter BB. Commissioner's Rule on Reporting Requirements, Section 61.1022C, Texas Academic Performance Report.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start on page 240 in the board report, and I'm going to highlight pieces of the TAPR report tonight. As required by TEA, we will conduct this public discussion. My favorite to share highlights of this report
You received the full report as well as lines of information based on this report. I'm going to highlight overall key areas and I welcome questions that you may have. As presented in our accountability report, our scores are showing an increase, so that's good. As we move through the report, you'll see where we have two programs to track and report data, the TPRS and TAPR, the TAPR. The TAPR, our focus tonight is provided to fulfill public notification of requirements. In this report provides extensive information on school and district staff, programs, and student demographics, as well as our accountability performance. The public is able to access the TAPR report in these three locations, the Economic Saginaw website, campus libraries or offices, as well as the TAPR or TPRS website. The TAPR content is very lengthy. The TAPR report contains content on the following: STAR and EOC data, dropout and graduation data, as well as attendance data. In addition to this, we have CCEMR related indicators, and information will be given on all of these, including an update on the board goals, which includes CCMR. In addition to the CCMR indicators, we also have student information, staff information, as well as our programs of study and the budget. I'm pleased to report that the Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD coming out of COVID had an 87%, which is a B rating. And in special education, we met all requirements, which is excellent. We'll move into the performance information. We'll start with STAR and EOC reporting information. As we go through these slides, you'll see both approaches and needs. You'll see on this graph the reading performance for 3rd through 5th grade at the approaches level for all demographics. You see a steady upward movement for most populations, with our highest at the 5th grade with an 84% rating for all. And that's in the dark blue at the first of each one. On this chart, you'll also notice gaps. The gaps are indicative of not enough students to make a population. We have about 25 students who would make that population. So where you see the gap between the 80 and the 88, that's for the American Indian. We don't have enough at that grade level for that. As we move on, you see the 6th through 8th grade performance. This is 8th grade shows the highest with an 87 for all at the 8th grade. When we move on, we move to the MEETS performance. This is STAR, 3 through 8 reading again. All is highest at 60% in grade 5. We continue with this through grade 8, and again we see grade 8 being the highest at 8th grade as well. In 8th grade with 63%. We move into the ELA end of course. We have both English 1 and 2. English 2 is our highest with a 79%. And at the MEETS level, again, English 2 is 61. Now we'll move into the math performance. We have 3rd through 5th grade on this slide at the approaches. We are again seeing the 5th grade class at the highest at a 78, and we continue to see an upward trend. For the 6th through 8th grade, as you see, it's similar to the 3rd through 5th. We see where that 6th grade is our highest at a 75. We see that dip in 7th grade, and we have added systems in place to address the needs of both our 4th and 7th grade math, including a new instructional coach for middle school. When we look at the MEETS performance, we see movement upward again. Again, 5th grade is showing the highest at the MEETS level. These are the federal requirements when we look at MEETS at 45%. And 6 through 8, our highest again is at the 8th grade level at 43%. When we look at Algebra 1, that is our EOC test, the only one, only EOC in math. And this is our last one. Again, math is at 80% for approaches and 41% at the MEETS. Science performance, here you see our science scores at 71% and 77% for approaches for both 5th and 8th grade, the only elementary and middle school tested. And then For the meets, we have a 39, and again, 8th grade at 49%. When we move up to the end of course biology exam, the only EOC for science, biology is at 89% at approaches, and it's very nice to see at the subtops in the 90% for several of those. The percent at meets, we're at 64%, which is excellent for all students, and you see that 80% for one of our subtops. Social studies for grade 8, the only area tested has we hit 63% at approaches for grade 8, and for meets, we hit 32. This is interesting because when we move into U.S. history, we have our highest score of all at 92% for all, and a 74% for the meets level. Moving on, now we look at a comparison of the state, region, and district. In this, for all grades, all subjects, we are above both the state and the region at 77%. Moving to that meets level, we are above the state and 1% below the region for all subjects, all grade levels. Moving into the percentage for ELA reading, you see, again, we are above the state and the region at 79%, and above the state and the region at meets for ELA and reading. Math continues to be a major focus. We are even with the region and just above the state, and just below the state and region at the meets level. When we move into science, we're doing quite well being above the state and the region on both the meets and approaches level. And when we move into social studies, we see the same above the state and region at approaches and meets. When we look at growth, we're looking for 1 year's worth of growth for our students. And in this shows, do you notice it's not starting at 3rd grade because it compares it to the 4th grade to the 3rd grade. And in this, we see 4th grade reading and math showing a 78% growth and 70% of students showing growth. When we move into 5th grade, we see in reading, we're at 91%, and in math, we're at 79%. Moving into, 6th grade, we have 66% in reading, 60% in math, and then 89% in reading for 7th grade, and 57% in math. Again, math is that area at 7th grade that we've added more systems to address those needs. 8th grade, we have 87% for reading and 75% in math. As we continue to move on, in our EOC, notice we're comparing EOC 2 because we are able to compare it to EOC 1. In our algebra, we're at 70 and 72%. For academic growth score, this chart shows that growth for our population for all is at 75% and no subtops. This is interesting. When we're looking for performance gaps between subtops, we're looking at a 10% gap. You'll notice in this we have no 10% gaps, which means we're addressing the needs of all at the same level. And we see that for reading as well. Very, very proud of the 80% growth there. And then when we move into math, the same we see. We do see a 10% exactly between our economically disadvantaged and all. So that's an area that is being addressed on the campus level. Moving to the next piece, we have attendance. We are just above the state and region at 95.6. Notice this is lag data. It's the 2021 school year. Dropout is lag data as well. This is excellent. We have about a 99.9% graduation rate overall. When we look at college readiness, remember, this is, here you'll see our college ready graduates at 41.4%. This is lag data based on the class of 2021, but it's the report for 2022 again. And we are just coming out of COVID, so we saw a drop in our CCMR. Here we have the readiness. We saw the drop here again, but we had a rise in special ed because of the programs that we're able to offer that show career readiness for our special ed population. Our average SAT score, you'll witness here, the average is 1054 for all populations. When we move to ACT, it's 20.5. The next section deals with student ethnic distribution, the demographic data here of our students, that's pardon me, not demographic, but ethnicity. And then our student demographic group. We are just below, or we are sitting at 44.2% economically disadvantaged. Our EDs, or emergent bilingual, are 13.6. Students with disciplinary placements, I'm proud to say, is below the state, and our at-risk population is at 51.3, which is below the state. Moving to the next piece, we have our teacher distribution, ethnic distribution. We also have our teachers' years of experience. It's kind of nice to see the variety that we have there. It's very nicely divided. Our enrollment by programs in our ESL, we have 13.1% of our population is ESL. For GT, we have systems in place. We're working to increase this. We'd like this to at least be at the state level for our GT, and our talent pool work is helping that and the additions we've made in that program. Additionally, our special ed, you'll see the increase is above the state, and those numbers continue to increase throughout this year. The next piece that is required to report are violent and criminal incidents. On this sheet, you'll see that our highest level of violent or criminal incidents has to do with fighting at 262 incidents last year. We also are required to report the number of graduates. This is very interesting. We're required to report the performance in post-secondary institutions. So how are they performing when they go to college? Interesting, we can only gather data from Texas schools, and we can only get the GPA for Texas schools which have that are junior colleges or two-year public colleges and four-year public universities. So when I was looking at this data, I thought this was interesting. In our Texas public schools, here at Roswell, we have 226 students we're able to account for, and doing some math, taking away the unknowns, we have a 70% of our college graduates are making a 2.5 or better, which is great because typically you'll hear 50% of the kids who attend college will end up failing out of college. So the 70%, I'm proud all three high schools have numbers above 50. At Saginaw High School, here we have 225 students with GPAs, and we are at a 63% scoring a 2.5 or above. At Chisholm Trail High School, we have 195 with GPAs, and we have a 66% with GPAs of 2.5 or above. The last piece of tonight's report has to do with the board goals. We have 3 specific board goals we created 2 years ago, and in those there would be early childhood literacy, aligned to 3rd grade STAR results, early childhood math, aligned to 3rd grade STAR results, and college and career and military readiness, aligned to graduates that meet readiness requirements. When we look at early childhood literacy, we are just barely exceeding our goal of these last couple of years. We're at 49%. We anticipate meeting that goal by 2024. In early childhood math, this is a little bit tougher, but we've got systems in place. I don't feel like we need to go back and readdress. I think at the end of 2023, we can look at it, see if we need to change that. We made incredible progress in this last year. We're hoping to see that same progress made with the intervention strategies that we have in place for students in that needs area. Now, this is the interesting one. CCMR, I can hear a little chuckle, so this is interesting. You can see in the COVID year, we were doing very well in 2020 because that's when we went into COVID at the very end, but we had a strong 67%. Coming out in 2021, we dipped with a 53%, we're back up 1%. And this is where we really we feel like we have a strong program in place. Here's the kicker. The state has come back, and to be an A district, you have to have 88% of your graduates show CCMR readiness. That jumped from 60% this past year. So we've got a plan in place. We'll see increases, but we're very concerned about the 88% and no time to work that in. It changed effective last year.
Dr. Parker, do you mind giving the date at which we received that information that it's going to increase to?
Tricia, it was this fall. I don't have the exact date, but it was this fall.
So after the school year started?
After the school year started.
So we started the year without knowing what the goal was.
Yes. And The data is based on last year's data. So in 2023, we'll be looking at 2022 data. Very frustrating. I will tell you, the numbers will increase. They will increase because of what we're doing, but they'll probably change again before.
When we talk about shifting goals, this is one of the issues, and we still do not have the accountability system. The tests that we're about to take, that the kids have never taken before in this format, and we only have preliminary, really, what that test will look like. The accountability system is not been published yet. That will come out in the fall of next year. So it's like starting a game and not knowing how you score points. But I guess that's on the last buzzer. That's all.
You hope you're heading in the right direction.
Correct. So it's a very difficult year in that area, but it's something that I don't think people quite understand, that this accountability system is constantly moving and changing.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And while it's constantly moving and changing, the state is changing what counts for CCMR points when it comes to certifications.
So one thing just to be clear, and kind of speak on behalf of Ed Services in the whole district, all of that's the game. Our goal is always to talk about the individual kids and growth. So my frustration that I just showed is not indicative of how we respond to kids' learning deficits. We still have to work very hard for each individual child and set goals using time-tested methods that we have, and also looking at ways we can improve in areas. Its testing system, the accountability system is frustrating, but we're not going to wait for that to come in before we have to take steps for kids to improve. We can't wait on that, and we're not. So I appreciate all that work that you're doing.
I appreciate that, and I'll tell you, the people behind me who support our teachers and classrooms and everything we're doing, we're going in the right direction. We're doing things right, and we have systems in place to show success, and we're meeting the needs of kids to the very best of our ability and what we're allowed to do and can do. It didn't take the TADWELL reports to tell us that. We need that. So, any questions?
Okay, at this time, the hearing is open to public comment. If there's anyone that wishes to be heard, please come to the podium. Okay, seeing none, at this time, the public hearing on the Texas Academic Performance Report for the district is closed. Please be advised that the Texas Academic Performance Report, this report will be posted on the district website for the public. Moving on, we have set July 2023-2024 board meeting dates.
So bring your attention to page 322. Those dates are consistent with the dates that we used this year. And so
Somebody. Second.
Motion by Don, a second by Liz. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? There are none, motion carries 6-0. Now consider approving a staffing proposal, Dr. Brown.
I make a motion to approve the staffing proposal as presented.
Motion by Tim and a second by Liz. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And there are none, motion carries 6-0. Next, consider acceptance of a donation of a book vending machine to Elkins Elementary.
We do have one donation tonight. As you mentioned, the Elkins Elementary PTA has raised funds and purchased a book vending machine that they would like to donate to the Elkins Elementary. This is an item that would be used for providing student incentives and rewards in the way of books, to support literacy in our elementary. The donation has been reviewed by our operations department and does meet all the district's criteria for acceptance and placement in our book.
Second. Anyone from Elkins PTA?
There are some. So let's take a vote and then we'll let's take it. Was there any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? And there are none, motion carries 6-0. And I know we have representatives here tonight from Elkins. Y'all would stand up and we can recognize you as well as your name.
Any of us who have tried to raise money for anything, that's how difficult that is. And I said $5,490. That's a lot of effort. Everything y'all do.
Next, we have consider approving the City of Fort Worth pedestrian access easement. Mr. Welch.
The city of Fort Worth is continuing their trail expansion. It goes coming under the QT, Field Rate 20. They're expanding the Trinity Trails up north and connecting to the Spring Creek Lake Loop. And so you can all the way downtown to that point once that happens. We helped the city out, or actually with the city, it was the Terry Water Board on this loop. Ford would like to extend that loop from the southern part of our property, our western side of our property, and head it north into the Marine Creek Ranch Park. And that would push the trail up further north, close to the library, eventually go on the bridge, loop, Anderson Park, and just keep working its way up.
I move to approve the pedestrian access easement for the city of Fort Worth as presented.
Second.
A motion by Liz and a second by Tim. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Motion carries 6-0.
Madam President, just a quick comment. This is really the evolution of work that's been done for many years. We go back to the Fort Worth bond that helped improve the trail system, but even before that, we had advocacy at the Fort Worth level. We had a group from the TCU nursing program that worked on this Anderson Trail extension. With the purchase of this property, obviously, it gives us that opportunity. Mr. Welch and I have walked it. It's right behind the building here. It's a beautiful area and a little bit easier to walk with no leaves on the trees, but there are plenty of leaves when we went through there. But as you see it marked on the map and the board packet, we did do it to the extension or to the west as possible. And that will give also access to our kids to Discovery Labs to be able to enter that area or farther to the north without having to use some of those exploratory trails. And so it's going to be a lot more efficient for us to be able to get into that area, and then also, of course, connectivity. So kids will be able to, and community members will be able to go here to Cromwell Marine Creek. So we're really excited about this, and hopefully this won't be the last one. This trail at some point could extend all the way to Boswell High School there, because that's where the floodplain eventually will continue. So this is exciting to see all this connect and provide that for our community.
Next, we have a third teacher abandonment in a position without good cause.
Good evening, President Ring, Dr. Chevrolet, Board of Trustees. I have for your consideration a abandonment for Mr. Donovan Tate at Chisholm Trail High School. He was a teacher and a coach and has gone on to a position out of the state. And it's on page 341 of the board package. So as you review that, I'm happy to answer any further questions or concerns that you may have with that.
I move that the board find that good cause did not exist under section 21.105, parentheses C, close parentheses, open parentheses 2, close parentheses, of the Texas Education Code, for Mr. Donovan Tate to abandon his contract for the 2022-2023 school year. The board did not consent to his resignation, and that the board authorizes the superintendent to file a complaint with the State Board of Educator Certification to seek sanctions for his abandonment of contract.
Second. I have a motion by Steve and a second by Donna. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Motion carries 6-0. Again, that concludes our action items. So moving on to the routine monthly report. Were there any discussion or questions there? Okay, then let's take a look at the reviewing the board planning.
This is on page 377 of the packet. It's that time again. We're looking at finance and preparing for 2023-24, along with the interactive report that you see listed there, also the human resources campus staffing report. Some of those areas we know will be front-loaded with the opening of the school and looking at those positions that we'll be bringing on early. So those will start to be identified and put out there, of course, with at the elementary as well. So that's going to start taking shape. We are going to, be careful as we go through the legislative session to determine what kind of funding we're hoping to get from the state and we increase the basic allotment. We've heard ranges from $200 to $1,000 in the basic allotment. And we're looking for 1,000 or more, of course. But also we're looking at what requirements go with that because some of those are tied to specific outcomes. So far those outcomes we're okay with because they're tied to salary increases, and that's most likely what we would be doing with it anyways, looking at compensation increases. But it is something that's all happening at one time as we kind of build that budget in the air, plane in the air kind of thing that y'all are used to that. So this is just one of those times. Although this year went more positive than previous years, and so we're hopeful for some good outcomes. Under action items, we see computer replacement teacher laptops. Just a reminder that we look at those on a regular cycle. So as those things go to you can quickly use, that we're replacing those. That's why we use those leases, and that's been very helpful. Kirk will be bringing that information. And also under consent agenda, we have contract renewals continuing, and also other staff.
Questions on that? Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Motion?
I move we approve the consent
Motion by Steve and a second by Tim. All those in favor?
Oh, thank you.
Any opposed? And motion carries 6-0. Moving on to board president's announcements. First, on the administrative side, you all had 2 forms that you would like to make. One was the RSVP for the NCAASB meeting on February 15th, and the second one was for the elected officials dinner hosted by Community Link on February 22nd. She gets the floors either way, so she's the record, please. And then on a personal note, I just want to thank everyone for all of the wonderful signage and videos and treats that you left for us all. We were very loved. Marilyn Tolbert was unable to be here tonight due to a family emergency, but she asked that I relay her thanks as well. And just to speak on behalf of the entire board, we are so appreciative of all that you do to make us feel valued here and as we're on the campuses. And we are just truly honored to be able to serve in this wonderful district. Is there anybody else that wants to add anything? Hod, thank you. And that's all I have.
On page 424 of your packet, we have different events on there. I do want to bring your attention to the STEM Showcase at Collins Time. That's on March 2nd from 5:30 to 7. We also have open houses for elementary school on March 9th. It's been a really good start of this semester, and to echo what Matrina was just saying, it's just really a privilege to serve with y'all. Y'all do an incredible job. Y'all make things look easy. Tonight's packet, notice I said page 424 and 425. There's a lot to be prepared, things that we have to review and look at, and from the audit reports to we have the audit report and also essentially our academic audit coming out the paper. There's a lot to take in and absorb and review, and I just thank y'all for your preparedness and wisdom as y'all guide the district through challenging times to go through an audit, not just to be clean, but also to have a conservative budget that prepares us for difficult things that can occur, but also planning for the future. And again, I just thank y'all for being focused on kids and your part, and tonight's just an opportunity to fill that love back from the community and from our schools, which is really what it's all about. Seeing those kids earlier and going, thank you very much, especially for sponsoring them today and just hearing, what their future is going to be, what they want to do. And I thought it was really neat. Them wanting to be, the two kids wanting to be police officers and knowing that we have somebody who was in the very school they were in that led that pathway. And that's really what fires us up, and it fires y'all up to be a part of leadership of the school district. And thank y'all for doing that with such heart.
See, there's no other business. I mean, we done.
Motion by